Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Lions Review Show. In this episode, we're going to focus mainly on the big statistics so far from the Lions series out in South Africa, but our main focus will be on one of the most important areas in modern rugby, the kicking game. And in particular, we're going to look in detail at the box kick, including the key roles players perform, in addition to some key errors the Lions have been making. And to make that possible, we're joined by Jacek Wallusch, who's got a detailed understanding of American football chase teams. And as ever, Graham Forbes from the dead ball area completes the lineup. Graham, do you want to just kick off with some of your overall thoughts of the tour so far?
So far it's been interesting. I think they'll be disappointed with the quality of opposition they've had to face, but you can only play what's in front of you, and they've been relatively dominant. Clearly the Japanese game was the strongest side they've faced so far. So I think they'll feel in a good position, but they'll be wanting a stern test. So hopefully the South African A game will be a shadow test and give them a real run. But I think overall they can be as happy as they can with the opposition they faced and the performances they've been putting in, really. Okay, so like previous weeks, we'll start with the story of the tour rather than the game this time, and we're going to concentrate on points and discipline and then a little bit on stats. So first out, we've got the points per quarter. We can see that the Lions have been completely dominant throughout all 4 games, particularly in quarter 4, where they're racking up 61 points in that fourth quarter. So they've won all the quarters. Really interestingly, is they've kept opposition down to 3 points in the final quarter, and that was Japan in the first game. So that's a really good figure for them. But overall, they'll be pleased with this. They're pretty consistent throughout the game in scoring. Now, whether they can take that on into the Test series is another matter, but it's still a really good, return for what they've been putting in. So penalties kind of reflects that as well. We can see that the opposition have given 48 penalties and the Lions have conceded 45. But we can also see that the bulk of their penalties are at the tail end of the game. 21 in the final quarter is a bit of a concern. That's obviously 5.25 penalties in that final quarter each game. So that's something they're going to want to cut down and not allow teams to kind of close out games against them. And at quarter 3 is really interesting as well. Keeping it down to 3 penalties is really good. It stops teams getting a foothold in the second half and getting easy points or easy territory. So that's a really good figure for them, but they'll want to drop that quarter 4. Penalty profile is also nice. We can see that they've given the bulk of their penalties away on defence and only 12 penalties on attack. That's really good. You don't want to be coughing up the ball when you've got possession. It means they're probably not being stressed at the breakdown quite as much as the South African sides would want it to have done. But on defence, we can see that they'll want to bring that defensive number down quite a bit. We saw in all of the games that when they get pressured in their own 22, they start to cough up penalties. So some attacking stats. We've got the playmaker breakdown. We can see they predominantly play off of 9, and then they split it pretty evenly between first and second receiver. And that's obviously we've seen people like Russell and Farrell playing out the back and interchanging, and that's what we're seeing. Pick and go is surprisingly low, all things considered. And the pod breakdown is pretty interesting. They carried everything off of Apex, really. They don't tip on much, or they don't play the inside ball, but they do play the pullback pass quite a bit. This is about 26% of the time they'll play out of back. So average ruck speed is a what we call lightning quick ball, and that's rucks under 3 seconds. So 23.5% of their rucks are under 3 seconds. That's pretty good. Progression, they're going forward on 56% of their ball. That's also good. And average phases per attack down 2.38. That kind of tallies with the defensive stuff we've been seeing of the opposition. The Lions aren't building loads and loads of phases. They're playing a couple of phases, and then if they're not making headway, then they're playing with a boot, which we'll kind of focus on a little bit tonight. But overall, stats are, kind of what you'd expect from the Lions, all said and done.
Great, thanks for that, Graham. So it's really interesting so far on the tour. We've seen the Lions scoring a lot of points. We're seeing some really inventive backline play, and it's been really cool to see the way the line out in particular is being used. But something we've not covered very deliberately so far in the last 2 episodes is the kicking game. Of course, the box kick's been a massive part of World Rugby for the last 2-3 years. And we're seeing probably more refined approaches with the box kick. And that's what we're going to focus on in this episode. So the first clip we're going to have a look at really demonstrates the Lions really are still learning. Okay, so this first clip. So this was the Sharks Mark 1. So the first game against the Sharks. This is a really interesting one, really early on in the game. So Lions back in their own 22, and they're going to look to put some pressure on with a box kick. Some teams are kicking really long, looking to catch teams behind. Teams like Bristol tend to do that. The Lions are in that kick to compete territory quite often with their kicks. So we notice there's some movement in the team to try and get guys into position. And then we've got two chase players highlighted in the right side. So we've got Curry and Rhys Ahmed on the outside, and they're going to chase and put some pressure on. And I think it's really interesting when this chase comes, how well the inside connect. But the fact that when Rhys Ahmed goes for the ball, he's not going for a clean catch. He just wants to disrupt, and that actually does win the ball. If you look at that then from the end-on angle, we can get just a bit more detail on what we're seeing in there. So a couple of things to note is that we've got Simmons who's coming around to the open side. Now, while you can't hear this, Owen Farrell is screaming for 8 to stay. So Simmons is just getting himself in the chase line. He's got Henderson on his outside, but he's being told that he needs to drop, and then he does that. So we've got some real good adaptation in action. If you just notice at the ruck as well, we got a little grab at the ruck. Now, Jacek can go into more detail in a moment, but those players in the ruck area, their part of their role is to protect the kick, but it's also to get in the chase. And notice the Sharks really early on being very tactical in a little grab in the ruck, trying to stop players from getting out. And the rest of the players, they're then going to connect up either side of the ruck. So the ruck players are really important, as are the players out the side. And just notice Josh Navidi just in behind. So he's hanging, gets into that space, into the catch space. And because Zamet's been in the air and disrupted the ball, Navidi then is in perfect position then to be able to get the ball, and the Lions have a counter-attack opportunity. The Sharks defended really well, but a real nice setup. Now we're going to go into a bit more detail of some of those roles. So Jacek, I'll hand over to you.
Okay, thanks. Right, so this is a very interesting type of box kick chase when the responsibilities are slightly different than normally. First, what we see here is a regular +1 protection. So Hill is with +1 player. He takes off a little bit too early. There is a defender coming up the edge, trying to charge the kick down. And now this is really very interesting. So normally, Hamish Watson would be responsible for containment. Containment meaning to press the ball carrier back to the inside because the help comes always from the inside. Instead, we've got the headhunter, ruck player and cut zone player going straight at the fielding player. Containment in this case becomes the scrum half's responsibility. So watch Hamish Watson going straight at the fielding player. So he's responsible in this case for contesting the ruck. It's a good idea because if you have Hamish Watson, who's arguably one of the best ruck contesting players on earth, why wasting his talent for containment purposes if he can immediately attack the ruck? Alternatively, if the headhunter misses the tackle, he's also a great tackler. He can come up and make a tackle. So this is really a very interesting concept. What is much more scary is the box kick protection. So this is going to be a good example of a slight misalignment. This is the first charge down box kick. So everything looks good, right? We've got a very good length, very good width. Protection is a caterpillar with 4 players. But the problem is, in this case, a guy who's 6'5" charging down the scrum half. So there is something wrong over here, right? Because Hugo should not be able to charge the kick down. So I marked this red line over here to show you where the caterpillar width ends. So Davies steps outside the caterpillar. And again, Hugo just charges the scrum half and he's a 6'5" guy. He's very tall. The reach is, of course, great in this case, and he's able to deflect the ball. Now, look at Courtney Lowe's feet. You see, there is no, let's say, no continuity, and the caterpillar should gain more length. Having guys like Courtney Lowe's and Hill, they're both like 6'5", 6'6", so you would expect a slightly longer caterpillar, but that wasn't the case. And this is the second charge down kick, and well, that doesn't look good. Hill supports the ruck. He's again the last caterpillar player, but look at his feet. You see, he opens up the hips to the outside, which is an open invitation for Hugo to charge the scrum off, and this is what he does. Again, there is no width and no proper length of his ruck. It's an easy job for Hugo. He blocks the kick, and then the Sharks score an easy try.
That one in particular is really interesting, Jacek, because a lot of those examples, you can see that there's a need to get length on the ruck, there's a need to get some width on the ruck, and we're seeing the difference between being in line and not. There's also a need for the kickers to do their bit. So the ruck itself is important, but then we've also got some technique, and it's interesting with both Gareth Davies and with Conor Murray that both of their intention was to kick long. We tend to see flatter kicks when they try and kick long. And even Conor Murray's hand placement on the balls is quite interesting because he points the nose right forwards, trying to punch through the ball, and that also contributes to the charge down in addition to getting the ruck itself wrong.
Just on the ruck protection, guys. So Hill, you mentioning Hill's feet, Jacek. He opening out his hips makes him very narrow, and obviously makes the width for the caterpillar very narrow. So that gives obviously a much smaller target for the scrum half to kick behind. So it's not necessarily Murray or Davis overstepping. They would expect there to be protection there because they'd expect the ruck to be wider. So Hill turning his hips and making it narrow is actually, they're probably kicking from the same place they would always kick from, except the protection is suddenly no longer there because they've suddenly narrowed out.
One very interesting point to notice over here. You see the charging Japanese players? He crosses hands like this. So this is something that we teach all football players playing in the special teams. So if you go for charging the kick down, always cross your hands. So there is no chance the ball can go through your hands. And to finish on a slightly more positive note, this is a proper caterpillar. Alwyn Jones over there, and you see again the dashed yellow line showing the caterpillar width. In this case, Murray is not stepping outside, and there is one extra blocker, so no harm done. It's a great kick, great protection.
Okay, so just dive a little bit back in. So we've gone through some real nice detail there, and I just want to make sure that we've covered some of those roles off. So Jacek will help us to break down some of these. So first of all, we've got a headhunter. So Jacek, in layman's terms, what's the headhunter responsible for?
He just goes straight and attacks the fielding player. Interesting points here. His alignment is close to the touchline, so there is no one to block him.
Cool, and that's a really nice point. So we often see those headhunters out in touch, so even over the line, and then they take an arc to come around. And we mentioned with the containment a moment ago that they are there to force the play back inside, to try and encourage the catching or the fielding player to go back into where the defensive support is. And then we've got a couple of other roles in there. So you've got the ruck player, which you mentioned on this occasion was Hamish Watson. Just remind us again, Jacek, what was the role of the ruck player?
The ruck players have two responsibilities. First, if the headhunter makes the tackle, the ruck player contests the ruck immediately. If the headhunter misses the tackle, he's the tackling player.
Yeah, awesome. And then outside of that, then we've got a catch zone player and we've got pass zone players. So catch zone, I'll probably identify that one. So catch is the area which the ball is being fielded, just making sure that there's no immediate breaks through. And we see a lot of escorting and players trying to create little holes in the line. I noticed that there's some white shirts in the line, and I always call them holes. So a player of the fielding team, they effectively create a little space for a fielding player to be able to break through, and the catch zone players are there to try and prevent that, and got a massive role in giving little nudges along the way to try and make sure that they fight for their space and they stay in a nice connected line. And then outside of them, we've got our pass zone players. Jacek, do you want to just quickly go through what the pass zone players are responsible for?
They just make the life much harder to whoever's going to get a pass. In this case, Sinclair is a pass zone player as well. So the moment he realizes there is no one to receive the pass, he becomes a catch zone player. It's a very, very smart move.
Yeah, it's a really nice point, Jacek. Those players, they're constantly trying to identify whether they can act like a net and they can catch the fielding player within their own little space when they catch the ball, rather than allowing them to be able to run or if there's no passing option, then they might as well go in and try and trap them in. And then so I was going back to a couple of points we made just from that very first clip. The players who then wait in the backfield, I know this is the kicking play on this occasion. So we've got the scrum half will often drop back. In the first clip, you remember that Simmons dropped back to the edge, and that's because Ali Price was chasing up into the chase line. And Graham, will probably pick up from yourself with some of the kind of defensive roles in there, Graham. Where would you see maybe some of the benefits of having a scrum half holding the backfield versus a number 8?
So a couple of benefits. Obviously, if you get a 9 onto the touchline in the 15 or 5 metres, you've got a big passer to get the ball back in field very quickly if you want to counter attack. Also, more likely to be able to kick return. You don't really, if you've got a 9 or a 10 floating around in that backfield, they can always put a new bomb up and the 8 can chase. So there's a lot of benefit to having one of your kicking players dropping back in this context. It's obviously Murray. Something I also wanted to pick up on as well is the headhunter. And we've got the escort team here. You can see them crowding the catch zone and ruck player. And we want the headhunter to obviously put pressure on. So what you're really looking for him to do is penetrate that escort team. You probably see it a little bit better with the Reece Zammit clip we had earlier on, where he actually punches through that group of players and is able to actually get up and compete and disrupt. So it's not just a case of that headhunter really does need to penetrate through that team on these kick chases, and if he doesn't, then the escort team has kind of worked its duty.
Okay, so I really hope that you've enjoyed breaking down some of the box kick. Now I think it's time to get into what the test team might look like. So we've got a decent idea so far as to who the players really standing out there. So let's get straight into it. So let's go with the front row to start with.
I'll go with that one. So I think on reflection, probably Sutherland, George and Furlong are going to be the test starters. I think Vunipola maybe had a bit of a tough time at scrummaging the other day, and Sutherland tidied that up a little bit. I've liked the look of Sutherland around. He's quite dynamic. Maybe he doesn't have the ball skills of Vunipola, but he seems quite dynamic around the park. So for me, it's probably going to be at the moment Sutherland, George, and Furlong.
Okay, cool. I'm going to jump straight into the second row. I'm thinking it's going to be Toje and Henderson as it stands, with unless Alan Wynne follows through with my premonitions that he's going to miraculously recover and then jump on a flight and get out there. But I think Itoje has been incredible when he's been on the field. I think he's one of those players that is offering some go forwards in a team that maybe aren't getting as much go forwards in the contact areas they might. I think Henderson is a solid linear option and somebody who's shown some real good leadership out in the field as well. Jacek, go with your back row options.
So I think number 8, Folatau, Hamish Watson and Kerry.
I think that would be a pretty solid back row. Graham, what do you think in back row?
So I think we're a little bit undecided on number 8. I think Watson's a shoo-in. I think Watson has been the standout, if one of the standout players on this tour. And I'll be honest, at the start of this, I didn't think he was going to be pushing for the test team, but now he'd be my first player down on the test team on the team sheet. I think number 8's an issue. Faletau hasn't really been as dynamic as I normally see him. I'd quite like to see Curry running there. I'd quite like to see a back row of Curry, of Watson at 7, Laws at 6, and Curry at 8. I'd quite like to see Curry and Watson in the same back row, and I think Laws could balance that out. Still a couple of games to go, but that's the back row I'd like to see. So Laws at 6, Watson at 7, and Curry at 8.
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? Probably one of the toughest areas to select. I think I'm on Faletau with 8. I think he's been incredible. Curry, I think, is the best English player on tour. I think he's genuinely think he is world class in a big way. And then it's hard to disagree with Watson at 7, to be honest. I think we could go around in circles on that one. Scrum half, obviously, Conor Murray as the tour captain. You kind of feel that he's probably in prime position. Gareth Davies probably struggled a little bit against the Lions against the Sharks rather. Sharks Mark II, and Ali Price has had a fairly solid enough tour so far, but I can't see him pushing the test team at the minute. Any disagreement on Conor Murray to start?
No.
And then we're straight into 10.
Curry's there.
In a 10, so we've got obviously Farrell is pushing himself forwards. I think Biggers had a solid enough tour so far. Probably not had the opportunities he would have liked. And obviously Finn Russell is carrying a knock. Marcus Smith is just about landing, I imagine, at this point in time. So it'd be interesting to see what impact he has on tour. I personally have backed Bigger pretty much since just before the Six Nations. What are we thinking, guys?
So I think we're going to see Farrell at 10, but I think a lot of this is going to be driven by the 12-13 combination. And I've felt all along that the pack is a little bit underpowered compared to the Springboks, and I think they would want to balance that out with a midfield. So I think if Henshaw or Aki start at 12, then we're going to get Farrell at 10. If Farrell starts at 12, then we're going to get Bigger at 10. I can't see Smith coming in and pushing for the test team straight away, and he's realistically only got maybe one game to stake a claim. So he's really there just as injury cover for Russell with torn Achilles. Henshaw's got a hamstring strain as well. So I don't know. A lot of it's going to come down to who plays 12. And I think if Aki plays 12, it's going to be Farrell at 10. If Farrell plays 12, then it's going to be Bigger at 10, obviously.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's some big shows to be made in there, isn't there? I think Harris has actually impressed me. I think he's played really well. As somebody who's maybe a bit of an outside call when it comes to the squad selection, I think he's been really solid so far. I mean, if Henshaw's fit for me, I'd go Bigger, Farrell at 12, Henshaw at 13. But I see what you mean when it comes to the physicality aspect of it. It'll be interesting to see which way they go. And then the back three potentially less contentious. Although I mean, there's maybe a couple of big decisions. Josh Adams probably written himself into the team sheet. Probably dead cert on the wing. Big decision between Watson and Lewis Rees-Zammit, I think. Watson has been absolute quality when he's come on. Not had a huge amount of ball, but the small opportunities had, I thought he's been very good. Lewis Rees-Zammit is just something else. He's your game breaker. He's the guy that's going to do something when things are really tight and he just needs somebody to do something. He's your guy. So big call between them. Then obviously at 15, tough seeing a team without Liam Williams. It's tough seeing a team without Hogg. So massive shout between them. I'm probably thinking Hogg in terms of kick return and his solidness under the high ball and be able to put the ball back into enemy territory.
Yeah, I'll go with you. Hogg at 15. Definitely Adams on the left wing. I've never seen a back three collection of players so strong in as long as I can remember. You know, absolutely every single one of them could play in the test team. And even at the start of the tour, I thought maybe Van der Merwe wouldn't make it, but he's pushing for a start. And And then you've also got Daly, who's playing 13, but also can do a job at 15 and on the wing as well. So it's an incredibly strong back three, and definitely a weapon they're going to be using in the test. They'll be looking to counter attack and things like that. I think probably on balance, I would probably go with Watson at 14. He's only had limited game time, but what he had, he was so dynamic and brought so much pace onto the ball. His movement in small space is just incredible. So I'd probably, Zamet's just pure pace, just raw, unadulterated pace, and it's so hard to defend. But Watson just seems to get around a little bit more for me at the moment. Just appears places where he doesn't need to be and does something like the punch through the middle to score his try yesterday. Just, where did he come from? He was just suddenly there, took the ball, broke 2 tackles and was gone. And there's just something about Watson that just elevates him for me. So for me, it's Watson probably on the right wing with Hogg at 15 and Adams on the left.
Well, there's a good reason why selection is my least favourite thing to do as a coach or as anything involved in the game. I think it's an incredible task, and I don't envy the coaches. But that leaves us with just a few thank yous. So thank you to Jacek for all of your wonderful work on the kick chase, Jacek. Thank you to the team at Badger Data and all the guys who put together the stats. They are, for me, they're gold dust. They really help us to illuminate the game and to see the game in a slightly different way. Thank you to Graham for all of your wonderful analysis and indeed for all the contribution to those stats. And we will really look forward to seeing you for the next big one, building towards the South Africa and then into the test series. So we'll see you soon.